Hello, viewers and supporters online. This is Tim Mosso with the Watchbox, and I'm here with founder, co-founder, proprietor, and editor-in-chief of Quill Pad magazine online, Elizabeth Doerr. Elizabeth, welcome. Good to see you again.
Hi, Tim. Great to see you.
Now, let me ask you a quick question, because everyone's got a different perspective on this moment. You operate a magazine. You've got a staff. You're usually, at this time of year, working on novelties and trade shows. What's different, and how are you coping with it from a magazine operator's perspective?
That is a great question. The biggest difference being, of course, that we can't see the new products live. So we're working with digital photos and descriptions and things like that, which is not, I have to say, our preferred way of working, but it's all we've got at the moment. So we're making the best of it.
Now, I can totally understand from my ears on the outside looking in, sometimes the press kit is all I get. So I understand what it's like. And it's interesting to see, because it might be like a portent to the future. I mean, what do you see as the fallout for the trade shows and what the world looks like in the watch space after this year? Are we going back to a normal Basel World or SIHH type pattern, or is it just permanently dispersed and year long?
That's actually a question we're all working on right now. And the news of the last couple of days has been pretty dramatic, I'd have to say, for the trade shows. You've probably heard everything. Basel World released a release where they're not loving the idea of paying back the exhibitors' fees and dues in full, which the exhibitor committee is now pushing back a little bit. So, in no uncertain terms, they also said this could widely affect the future of the fairs. So Basel World is really kind of hanging in the precipice right now. We have no idea what's going to happen with the physical trade show. I know that Basel World is working on digital possibilities and other solutions, shall we say, that will make sort of a year-long release of new watches and things possible on their platform. It remains to be seen how that works for them. It's a very novel time, I'd like to say. Watches and Wonders, we have no idea. They haven't released the information yet. A little bit of news kind of was released without their knowledge, I want to say. Le Temps reported, I think it was yesterday, that they are planning to split from Basel World again for 2021 and remain in that April spot that they were originally aiming for, which would see the fairs not being back-to-back should they run in 2021. What that all means for the greater watch world is kind of anybody's guess at the moment. But I have been talking to CEOs in the last few days, and most of the CEOs are confident that no matter what happens, their business won't be sorely affected. They see the digital era here. They can release anything they want, anytime they want, and it's working for them, they say.
But aside from the trade shows themselves, there is the commercial year, I guess the lost year for many of these brands. What does the landscape of brands look like after this for the groups and the independents? Because many of them were already treading on thin ice.
Patek Philippe has taken the decision not to bring out any of its new watches in 2020. They did not release that information publicly. It kind of leaked. But ostensibly, it was to give the retailers a rest. I mean, normally they must buy a certain quantity of watches every year. As we know, retail shops have been closed for months now, and giving the retailers a rest is a good idea. Rolex seems to be wanting to follow suit. They were originally going to release their new products digitally on April 29th. That would have been the day they would have released them in Basel. And now they've sent out notices to the press that they're not going to do that, and we don't know a new date yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if they follow suit, because it is a good idea. So I think those are the two brands that retailers always must buy into. And now with the absence of that, it does create a little bit of room for them to breathe. Also, maybe for the independent brands to step up a little more. But some of the independent brands, you are completely correct, are also hanging by a thread. This is not a good time for them. They live sort of paycheck to paycheck. That having been said, some of them are still doing pretty good business online at the moment. That's working for them.
Now, the online model, it's both for commerce and for model debuts. It's being embraced in a way it never was in the past. I've heard say that Patek Philippe is allowing watches to at least be advertised online. And there's talk that because this is an extraordinary circumstance, brands that previously would have eschewed even the listing of inventory online are a bit more amenable to it. Do you think this is going to be a permanent change? Because some brands were dead set against, and now they're, if anything, forced into the practice by necessity.
Yes, and I think, well, first off, from my information is that Patek Philippe is allowing one UK retailer to sell online. It's a chain. That's my information. 90% sure that's correct. Rolex has not yet followed suit, but I wouldn't be surprised if that comes next. And I do think that's here to stay. Richemont is already doing it. LVMH is already doing it. Most of the rest of the world is already doing it, whether through their own websites or through retailers, authorized retailers.
Now, beyond, I think, this moment, looking towards 2021, are there any brands or groups that are actually poised to come out of this stronger than others? I know we talk about it being generally disastrous for everyone from consumers to the brands themselves, but is anyone in a stronger, other than the obvious Patek Philippe and Rolex, which are well capitalized, are any brands poised to better serve the kind of customer who's still buying, or the kind of landscape, commercial landscape that's going to emerge?
The healthy, cash-rich brands are going to come out of this no problem. I mean, yesterday Morgan Stanley, or the day before, Morgan Stanley released some very interesting under-the-radar numbers. For example, Richard Mille, I think they did $900 million or Swiss francs worth of turnover in 2019, selling only 4,900 watches, which meant that the average price of a watch was over 200,000 euros. Now, you can't tell me that that company is not cash rich. And I spoke to Tim Malachar, who is the global marketing director for Richard Mille, just a few days ago. And he told me that they are selling only through their own boutiques right now, and that the sales of their watches hasn't really faltered. It's just more the logistics that are having trouble right now. People getting to the boutiques to pick up their watches, mail services getting the watches out to their customers, and in some cases, even the suppliers. So they can't quite build all the watches they had scheduled for right now because the suppliers are closed in Switzerland as per government order, some of them. So there are some logistical things going on in the background, but as a whole, brands like Richard Mille, like Rolex, like Patek Philippe, which are rich in capital, will have no trouble going through even a whole year of this, if you were to ask me. It's the smaller brands, again, those who are really living from sale to sale, they are going to have trouble.
From my perspective as a vendor, we're seeing that very much what you've mentioned is sort of the state of affairs. The exceptionally strong brand names, Rolex, not exactly a brand that charges an arm and a leg for its watches by the standards of these things, but a very strong brand and well capitalized. And then some of the high-end stuff, Richard Mille, FP Journe, oddly, a Lange und Söhne, which is sometimes regarded as a little bit of a beleaguered brand during good times, but seems to have some resilience because that price point buyer sees an opportunity right now and is still spending. So expensive watches, for want of a better term.
Right, right. I think it's the mid-level watches, which we've been talking about for years already as the hardest hit segment, and those lower end watches, which have the smart watches and the Apple Watch and so on, as their new competition. They might come out of this a little shakier, but the ones that are owned by groups, the Swatch Group, like a Tissot or a Longines, I see no problem with them making full recoveries.
And that's a good point. You mentioned some of the lower end watches, because those of us who, read the FH Federation Horloger statistics every month on Swiss exports, we've been seeing pretty durably for 2 to 3 years now that the watch priced below 3,000 Swiss francs, and specifically below 1,000 Swiss franc, has really been getting hammered by the advent of smartwatches. I think the surprise to me during this period has been that more affordable watches from the likes of Longines or Tissot or Baume & Mercier, you might have thought intuitively those would sell better during a downturn, but they're actually selling worse. It's the high-end watch, the really high-end watch, that's been so resilient. And that kind of threw me for a loop because I expected it would be the opposite. But that's a real good point.
Volume, I assume. High-end watches, they don't make so many of them. They don't need to sell many of them to recoup their investments. You know what I'm saying? But some of those bigger brands at the lower end of Longines, Tissot, they're so entrenched in their markets. They're such a staple. I don't see them really having any trouble.
Now, you're in Germany, I'm in the States. We're both on lockdown right now, and we're dealing with essentially government-mandated self-quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've noticed in terms of our side of the business is that the big buyer who's still buying that Journe and that Lange and that Patek, He is actually based out of the Far East. We're seeing Hong Kong, we're seeing China again. Could you talk a little bit about the relative recoveries of Eastern and Western markets through this period and what that might mean for the industry?
Yeah, some of the CEOs I spoke to in the last couple of weeks have said that China and the Far East are already making steps toward recovery. They did see massive turndown. Ricardo Guadalupe of Hublot told me just a month ago that after the Hong Kong protests and right into the coronavirus, that their Hong Kong shops, the turnover was down 70-80%. He said, but they were already heading into a recovery period. He said that he could already see the upswing happening. I think in times like this, I honestly think people come back to their hobbies. People are looking for something that makes them feel good, whether it's your hobby as a watch collector or your hobby as a music enthusiast or whatever. You're not going to stay away from your hobby very long. So if you're the customer for those types of watches, you find a way.
It's funny I mentioned that because I still find myself cruising Auto Trader and Hemmings and Cars.com during this period. It's like the worst time to be looking at that sort of thing. But
Yeah,
it's a
right.
hobby. It's like I'm drawn to the lodestone rock. So I do see what you're saying there. So speaking of pastimes, as we're housebound watch collectors, we can strap shop, we can post wrist shots, we can surf the forums. Tell me a little bit about what's on Quill Pad and how you can mine the archives during this period of kind of forced quarantine.
Right. Well, we have a great search function in the top right-hand corner of the homepage, and you can just toss a brand or a watch in there, and something will come up from the last 6 years that we've been in business. We don't focus as much on the new watches, like the brand new, this came out yesterday and we're going to rewrite the press release. That's not really our MO. So you find a lot of in-depth stories, a lot of good information, maybe a nice vintage watch or a story that leads up into something that's happening in the now. A lot of rich background, and it's easy to search on our site. On the weekends, we tend to republish some of these old gems as well.
And so, of course, to our audience out there, Quill Pad, the name's a little bit deceptive. It's a watch website, but it's one of the best online repositories of articles, opinion, news coverage, model tests, collector insights from Gary G., Elizabeth's perspective on the industry from the inside. I really can't endorse it enough, especially because it's both excellent and devoid of paywalls, which is good right now.
Thanks, Tim. And you might find the article by you as well.
Oh yeah, I've been published once or twice. I've also got a photo study of a new Moser Streamliner coming, so that's in the pipeline. And let me ask you a question: if someone wanted to contribute, like let's say someone owns a watch right now and they wanted to try their hand at watch journalism and make a contribution, how would they reach out to you to make that proposal or to submit their effort?
You could email me at elizabeth@quillandpad.com. I look at everything.
And I say this because recently, as people have been stuck in their house, I've had people with their phones, saying, "Look, I can do a review here. I'm going to do a Tim Mosso, and I'm going to send it to you." And I'm like, "This is great, but I have no platform for this. I don't know what to say."
Yeah, we get interesting emails sometimes. A guy recently emailed me with this really long sort of opinion on what was it, children's watches, I think. And I thought, yeah, okay, it's not really our neck of the woods, but the way this guy worded everything, he was so passionate about it. I thought, I'm just going to put it out there. I just made it into a post and I said, one reader sent this and let's have a discussion about it. And it turned into a really interesting discussion. So if you just like searched children's watches, you would find that post.
So if you're dying to know about the latest flick flack, that guy's your man.
That guy's, yes, definitely.
No, I find that the best time to get together with other collectors, a lot of times it is the regional trade shows. And when you want to meet other people and hear their perspectives, it's going to be at places like Dubai Watch Week or Watches and Wonders Miami, Salon QP. And unfortunately, we've seen as the large shows have suffered, some of these regional shows have also lapsed. Watches and Wonders Miami, Watches and Wonders Hong Kong, Salon QP. I mean,
Yeah.
is there any trade show model that's going to last? Because it seems at this point, every time you get people and watches together, the economic model implodes regardless of scale.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think these regional models are good. I think the way Dubai Watch Week does it is excellent. I think they're not in there to turn a dollar right there. They're out there to cultivate enthusiasts and get the conversations going. And of course, as a result, they do see an uptick in their own sales, but it's not, no one is hard selling right at the event. It's more about people getting together, having a drink, relaxing, looking at watches. It's great. I see, as long as Siddiqui is willing to, the Siddiqui family who owns Dubai Watch Week and a multitude of stores in Dubai, as long as they're willing to continue putting this on, I can't see that folding anytime soon. Salon QP did indeed die. The QP was sold to a larger publishing house in London, who has decided it's not worth it anymore. So they closed both the magazine and the event. Watches and Wonders Miami, I don't think that's quite over yet, but of course we have no idea what's going to happen with the entire Watches and Wonders universe, how they're going to continue from here on out. It's my information, actually. There will be an announcement forthcoming in this month about at least what's happening with the main Geneva fair. I don't think Miami's dead per se. I think there's been a lot of shuffling though.
And just to recap for our audience, it had looked like for the 2020 year, initially Watches and Wonders Miami in February was going to be the first trade show for debuts. Of course, that lapsed as Watches and Wonders Miami became Watches and Wonders Geneva and supplanted SIHH. And of course, that then disappeared. And we wound up with Basel World in January in 2021 as our next trade show.
So unusual.
It's a little bit of a strange time. So let me ask you, I don't have the bird's eye view you've got. And just let me know, anything interesting happening in the industry right now might have skipped the headlines of the main blogs and journals, something I wouldn't see from a retailer's perspective. What's going on inside the industry that's just below the radar, just below the surface?
Honestly, everything's hibernating right now, as far as I can see. People, the government, the Swiss government mandated closure of factories. So all the major factories are closed. All the suppliers are closed. The lockdowns are very serious here. And I feel like with that, a lot of people also went into hibernation. I know this is Easter as well. People had vacations scheduled. They probably aren't going anywhere now, but I don't feel like there's a lot of people in the office at the moment. I do also feel like a lot of things that were scheduled to happen this month, like because of the shows, are now being postponed. Like you see, in the cinema world, you see a lot of the big releases being postponed to the fall and the winter. That's happening with the watch releases right now. That kind of scuttlebutt I am getting a hold of, like Saint Hublot, who had a big anniversary this year, 40 years, and they had some celebrations planned and big commemorative watches. All of that is on hold until the end of the year right now without any firm dates. But they're not the only ones. A lot of these smaller brands in particular can't get their supplies. So the watches don't get done. So they don't want to release them too early because then they create a demand that they can't fulfill. So it's a little bit of a conundrum at the moment. I really honestly think it's more hibernation than anything.
I totally agree with you. I think it's a crazy scenario where you almost aren't going to have a 2020 model year. We've got first the coronavirus shutdown, then we've got the mid-year Swiss vacation. And then at that point, we're almost looking at pre-Basel stuff in the fall. So, hey, if you've got that 2020 Olympic Collection Omega, that might be a collectible someday.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I'm sorry.
Well, it's true. All of that is being postponed. So.
Yeah, I mean, even the Olympics aren't going to happen. Maybe it's going to be a 2020 and a half Omega Olympic collection. So let me ask you a little big question. You know a whole lot of collectors. You know Ian, you know Gary, you know the whole crew, Josh and the group. What are those guys doing to pass the time as collectors right now? Window shopping, forums, wrist shots. How do collectors cope in a time like this?
That's a really interesting question. Actually, I did ask Gary this question, and he wrote a very interesting article, which we will publish on Saturday. So by the time this video airs, most likely that story will be online, where he gives a lot of tips about how to pass the time with your collection. We all have time now, so do some things that you don't usually do. Take your watches out, clean them, wind them. If you're of a mind, take your tools and open the back and have a look and do things you generally don't have time for. Really appreciate your watches. How often do we just have an hour to sit and look at one of our watches? I mean,
it's a very good point.
You might go detail your car, but you certainly don't very often detail your watch,
This might be the time to set all 30 of them to the correct time and wind them every single day. Pull the strap, get the wrist crud out from between the lugs, pose them in nice little shapes and arrangements. And I would even say, maybe now is the time to finally invest in that loop system that you've been saying you would buy. You got nothing else going on. Now's the time.
Yeah, I even bought like a home little photo, a little photo studio for home, which I hadn't had before. So I was going to practice my photography a little bit. I haven't done it yet, but I am going to. And the weather here, at least in Europe, is phenomenal. I mean, it's a great time to go out into your yard and set up some photo shoots.
And plus, you can get photo adapters for phones and loops. So a lot of times, if you have a high-end loop, there's a phone adapter you can get. You can dazzle your friends online.
Exactly. And like you said, window shopping online is perfectly fine.
eBay, Chrono24. Look, now is the time to like create that roadmap for the collection you're gonna assemble when times improve, circumstances are looking up. Know where you're going. Map it out now. Elizabeth, do you have any additional thoughts you want to share with the collector community? Encouragement, insights, off the cuff impressions of where we are and where we're going?
Well, I actually do want to say one thing. If you have the means right now, it's a great time to help out the watch community. Don't stop buying if you have the means. By all means, continue getting online, talking to other collectors, making a few purchases, like you said, eBay or Chrono24. This is a good time to do that and to support all these small businesses.
Absolutely. So if you're on the fence about getting that like Omega or a Hob ring, now would be a good time to get the Hob ring. And if you can right now, you're never going to see a better combination of available inventory and pricing. So sometimes that's the silver lining. And for the rest of us, we've got hope. We've got the cheer of community, the good fortune of our hobby being very online these days. And remember, check out quillandpad.com.